So there's going to be two different things that I'm going to talk to you about this morning. And the most significant one that I'm going to focus on is St. Christopher himself. Now we know that our church is called St. Christopher, but there was a saint whose name was Christopher. Hello, Nicholas. Who also is for whom we have named our church. All right? And there is a beautiful painting there that's called an icon that's going to be given to our church today and blessed. And it is St. Christopher. And so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to pull in a little bit from our gospel story today. And I'm sure for those of you who were listening to the gospel story, it was a little disturbing. Don't know if you heard it or not, but you heard there was a woman asking for healing for her daughter. And there was some words used about, should we give the children's bread to dogs? No. Seems like a strange choice, doesn't it? And yet, the woman said, well, even the puppies eat the scraps that fall from the master's table. And in that moment, Jesus said to her, you have spoken true. Now, we don't know whether Jesus changed his mind or he was simply declaring so that everyone around him could hear and know that God's love is bigger than all the lines that we draw. And when we say those people are outside, they are outside God's grace, they're at the edge. This woman was a Canaanite, and it just so happens that so was Christopher. So I'm going to pass around some pictures to you all that are sitting up here with me. I'm going to pass these around on your side, and I want you to look at those pictures of St. Christopher and tell me what you see. And I want to pass these around, Gabby. I want to pass this one to you. And I want you to tell me what you see. What do you see in that picture? What is odd, Giovanni? You see a kid on top of St. Christopher, and I'm going to explain who that kid is in just a second. Do y'all see that your pictures have a dog's head? Yeah. Very odd, right? Many icons of St. Christopher actually have a dog's head for St. Christopher. And the reason is because he was a Canaanite. He was a Canaanite, and it was believed that the Canaanites were beyond. They were outside. They were those people that we really can't accept. And one of the reasons that those icons are painted is to help all of us see that God sees it different. That when God looks at people, God doesn't see the other, the outsider, those dog-headed people. God sees beloved people who belong to him. All right, so St. Christopher was a Canaanite. He was one of those people, and he was huge. He was 7 feet and a half tall. He was a massive man. And they say he didn't look too attractive. He was kind of scary. He was a big, strong warrior, and he was working for the Canaanite king. And one day he thought, I notice that the king trembles when he hears Satan or the devil mentioned. He said, so the devil must be more powerful than this king, so I'm going to go looking for the devil and serve him. And so off went St. Christopher to find the devil. Well, he ran into a group of thieves that called themselves the devil, and he said, I think I found them. And he started working with them. So they would rob people. And remember, he's big and he's strong, right? Well, one day he noticed that when they passed a cross on the side of the road, that the thieves went away from it. They kind of were scared of it. And he went, who is this that even the devil is afraid of? And so he began a journey to figure out who this cross person was, who this Christ was. He found an old hermit who was a Christian, and the hermit began to teach him and tell him about the love of God. And in that learning, he became a Christian. He realized that the love God had for him was bigger than all of that outsider business that everyone else talked about. It was bigger than all of the evil and all of the darkness. So here is St. Christopher. He's a big, strong, tall man, right? And you know, they actually called him Reprobus before his name was Christopher, because Reprobus means a reprobate, a reject. That's how he was known. But he said to the hermit, he said, "What must I do to serve Christ?" And the hermit thought, well, I fast and I pray every day. Maybe you should do that. Now, I don't know if any of you have had big, strong, tall men in your life, but big, strong, tall men generally like to eat a little bit, right? And Reprobus said, I don't know if I can do that fasting thing. So the hermit thought with him and said, I have another idea. There is a river that passes here, and back in that time, they didn't have bridges over every river. They didn't have easy ways to get across the river. And so people would have to walk through the river, and sometimes the river would get high, and they would get washed down the river. And so the hermit told Reprobus, he said, you're big and you're strong. And when those waters come and they rush, you can stand firm. And so Reprobus took his place on the side of the river. And when a visitor would come, he would hold on to them and he would walk them through steadily across, even when the waters got rough, and get them safely to the other side. And that became his service for Christ. Pretty good? So here's where the child comes in, Nicholas. One day, Reprobus was standing at his place on the side of the river, and a very small child came to him. And the child said, I need help crossing the river. Reprobus said, no problem. He picks him up, puts him on his shoulder, and begins to cross through the river. And as he gets into the river, all of a sudden, the child becomes so heavy, like lead. Like he's not going to be able to make it. And he struggles, and he finally gets all the way across, and he sets the child down, and he says to the child, who are you? Why did you become so heavy when I was trying to cross the river? And the child said, I am the Christ child, and I carry the weight of the world. Christopher said, how do I know it's you? And he said, put your staff in the ground here and come back tomorrow. And the next day when he came back, his staff had sprouted into a palm tree. And oftentimes on icons you'll see, and ours has it too, there are palm fronds at the top. And Reprobus knew that that had been the Christ child. And from that day forward, he was known as Christopher. The word Christopher means Christ bearer or carrier. Just like the crucifer is the cross carrier, right? And so that's where Christopher got his new name. And he became a saint in the church, and people said, I want to be like him. Because he took who he was with all of his giant stature and strength, and he gave it in service to Christ. And he became the patron saint of travelers and outsiders. And we've been called to walk in his footsteps. And so I challenge all of us to reflect on who Christopher is and how that impacts our call. Who in our community are the dog-headed people that we need to remember that God says, my love goes beyond any barriers you draw? And who are the people that are traveling that need help getting through the waters of life and the difficulties that might knock them over? And how can we be a Christopher and carry Christ with them out into the world? Amen.